You know, when you're in the family and you feel like the black sheep of the family, it is because you have been called to be the spiritual pioneer to change the narrative of your family and the generations to come. Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Now, today I have decided I'm going to start a series. Something has been pressing on my heart to really go into deep teachings and to depth about this particular topic. Welcome to the first series. It's going to be a short full-part series. Depending on the response of my audience, it may continue, but for now it's a full-part series and it's called Beyond What You See, because I think it's very important as individuals we understood that this life is not as black and white as it seems, and the spiritual realm is something that you need to have a good understanding of in order to run a perfect race. You need to know exactly what you're in for. But the main part of the spiritual that I am going to be talking about is about generational patterns, how to know whether you've been chosen to be the one to stand in the gap for your family. Because sometimes there are certain battles that you experience in your life that it's not about what you do, it is not about how clever you are, it is not how talented you are. But there are certain things that can resist your growth, your success. Life itself is very spiritual. So in order for you to be able to fight certain fights, you need to understand what you're fighting and you need to understand your position in that battlefield. You know, no soldier goes out into a battlefield without knowing what position they need to stand in order to fight their battle. So that goes the same as us as individuals who have been called, who have been given an assignment to deliver here on earth. Now, not everybody is called to a crowd. Some people are called just for the deliverance of their family and the generations ahead of them. We're looking at the spiritual aspect to what it means to be called to deliver your family, what it means to stand in the gap. I want to set the scene for the rest of the 3 parts that will come after this video. So, what is a protocol breaker and what does it mean to actually break protocol? A protocol breaker is someone who breaks the rules. Rules that are set before you were even created. It may even be before your parents were created, before your grandparents were created. At some point, God will raise a person to come and break some rules. Rules that need to be broken so people can be free from bondage, setback, limitation, from lack. You know, because most of these rules are set in place. Only God knows how exactly these rules were put in place. But a lot of people have families where there are continuous patterns of certain behaviors, patterns of certain situations that just does not make sense. For some people, there is a glass ceiling that needs to be broken in order for one to excel. There are some families where the deliverer has not yet been birthed, but you may be that deliverer. Now, the question you may be asking yourself is, how exactly am I supposed to know whether I am called to be a protocol breaker? The very moment that God opens your eyes to see beyond the seeing is when you know that you've been called for something. You know, sometimes you can come from a family and you can analyze certain patterns. You know what? This doesn't look right. It seems like everybody reaches a certain age and suddenly death consumes them. It seems like each time the women in my family marry, the men start to get sick. It seems that the women in my family don't marry, but they bear children. That's the story of every single woman in my household. So when we have these certain patterns that we started to identify, that we're now paying close attention to, that is a sign that you've been called to be a protocol breaker in your family. Now, if we turn our Bibles to Isaiah chapter 58, verse 12, it reads, "Those from among you shall build the old waste places. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations, and ye shall be called to be the repairer of the breach, the restorer of the streets to dwell in." What does it mean to repair a breach? It means something is broken and something needs to be repaired. So I am going to raise somebody in this generation to be that individual. And mind you, some of these protocols are ancient protocols that were set before the beginning of time, that was set in your family. Something shifted and caused this breach, and now you have been called to repair that breach. And that's why you feel different. You know, when you're in the family and you feel like the black sheep of the family, it is because you have been called to be the spiritual pioneer to change the narrative of your family and the generations to come. That is the reason why whatever you try to do, you don't fit into the family. It feels like you're an alien in your family because you're starting to see things that no one is seeing. It seems like everyone thinks is normal, but what seems normal to people is not normal to you. No, this does not make sense. There must be a change. And I refuse to follow the same patterns. You are called to be a protocol breaker. That very moment that urge tells you that no, something needs to change, something needs to shift. This is not normal. That is when you have that revelation that you are the one that has been chosen to stand in the gap for your family. All God needs is someone who is ready to surrender and obey. God isn't looking for a group of individuals to change the story. All it takes is for one person, one willing person to be chosen to change the narrative of a generation. God doesn't need a crowd to make impact. All he needs is the heart of one person. A one person's yes to shift a whole bloodline. I want to talk about Noah. Now, Noah was a protocol breaker. Why I say this is because if you look at Genesis chapter 6, his genealogy, the individuals that were in the generation of Noah disappointed God so much because they were consumed with so much wickedness, so much disobedience that he regretted even making man until Noah came along. Noah was the first person in his genealogy to be fully submitted to God, to be obedient to God. And we saw that when God asked him to build an ark, though it did not make sense, he went ahead and done it anyway. But in the generation before him, there was no such thing. There was no such thing as someone who was ready to obey God. Every family has a deliverer. The journey of a protocol breaker is not an easy one. You are going to face so much resistance and adversary because you have been called for a great assignment. So you will face resistance. And sometimes you will be walking through this life rejected and mocked and not accepted by the crowd, and you will never understand why. It's because you've been called for a great purpose. When you're a protocol breaker, you're not just living for yourself, but you're living for the generations that will come after you. Being a protocol breaker is no joke. One thing you must know is that if you have been called to break protocol, be prepared to fight. Be prepared to identify your personal weaknesses. Because one thing I do find is that when you're a protocol breaker, the enemy is going to challenge you on all corners. What do you mean you are the protocol breaker? There are certain strongholds that will really fight you, grips you by your neck and say, I refuse for you to be the one. There's no possible way. You need to align with God. No one that has been called for such a great assignment to deliver a generation has ever had it easy. You are going to face your own personal battles. The resistance is with purpose. You're not experiencing the resistance for no reason. That resistance that tells you that you're not good enough is not because you're not good enough, it's because you are good enough. And so the enemy is going to do everything he can to distract you so you're not able to deliver your generation and those that are coming after you. I remember I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who has indeed been called to stand in the gap for her family, and she said, I just don't have the urge to pray. Like sometimes I want to pray, but I get so distracted and I forgot I need to pray. And I'm like, darling, don't blame yourself. You are called for a greater purpose, and I'm going to do every single thing I can to stop you. I am going to make sure that I keep that mouth shut so you cannot pray. I'm going to distract you so you don't spend time with God so he can reveal things to you. I am going to distract you so that you're not able to deliver your assignment, so that the bondage that your generation is in will continue to follow into the next generation to come, and so my plan will still stand. The bondage will remain, the chains will still be there. Understand that Jesus has the power to break chains, but it takes one person to stand in the gap for that to happen. It takes one person to stand in the gap to move God so much that chains are broken, protocol is broken, and people are free. It took Noah. Noah is the one who changed the story of his generation and the generation after him, because of his obedience. And from his obedience, God made a promise. I almost lost all faith in humanity, but you, Noah, you came to restore my faith in humanity. If Noah could move God to say such, then what makes you think that you cannot move God to change the narrative of your family? All it takes is one willing vessel. Being a protocol breaker is not a small thing. We've got more layers to this conversation, but this is just the beginning. So please do subscribe and comment and like, and please, If there's anything that you'd like me to really uncover in the next videos to come, and if you want this to exceed the 4 parts, well, this is the first part, so 3 parts, then please do comment down below. But this is where the story begins. So thank you for watching, and goodbye.